let me ask you about this first, but you bring in, because I do want to talk about the approach. It's a great, you don't shy away from bringing in your family to the videos. You had one where you talked about your daughter Brittany's first job and the lessons that you were trying to teach about her. Was that a conscious decision? I mean, I know I get asked a lot of times, I intentionally keep my family off of social media. I think that they're like, you want to go do it, you go do it. But we've tried to protect them growing up from, well, let's just call it some of the haters. But you intentionally bring them in and talk about the lessons as a father that you've bestowed upon your children. You talk about how you interact as a husband and as a family man. What was the decision like to decide, or was it? And then how have your family reacted to all of this?
Well, we've been in the House of Delegates. We've been in the Virginia State Legislature now for over 8 years, or for right around 8 years. And then we had also run for Congress as well. And so when you run for Congress, your family just kind of, by nature ends up, you take family pictures together, and you go to events together, and you're in parades together. So if you look at most of my reels, I don't put up a lot of like pictures of my family or whatnot. Like I'll reference them. Like I referenced, Lily's first job and whatnot. But I don't put a lot of pictures out there or whatnot, because I do want them to be able to do their own thing around town without having to contend with people that do disagree with me politically and can't seem to separate children from their parents when it comes to commenting on these things. But for the most part, we wanted to be able to share, again, practical stories. One of the things we try to do on that is when we're talking about a particular issue, maybe it's parenting. A lot of times it's just very simply sharing some experience that you've had. It's not even so much as just, some of it's maybe advice driven, but a lot of it is just, hey, we did this, or this is something that we learned. And I think that's a powerful way of being able to communicate with people. We also communicate, like I communicate my mistakes as well. I did this, I screwed up, and hey, I could have done this differently, but hey, there was an opportunity to have this experience or to be able to teach this lesson. And that's something that people have at least appeared to appreciate with our audience. And every once in a while they'll send in a request. Hey, can you do, one on I had one recently where it was a mom who's a friend of mine. She goes, hey, do you got any advice for moms, raising boys? And so that ended up being an interesting way to talk about something. And I grew up, my dad was still involved with my life, but I grew up predominantly raised by my mother. And so I was able to share some experiences with that. And that's been, again, the overall approach. And I think, when you're in politics, your family at some point is going to get brought up.
Right.
And so we try to do it in a way that's, both respectful of their privacy, but our kids like it. My my kids have been involved in some of the reels we've done, some of the shorts we've done, and they get a kick out of it.
So it's funny, going back for a second about approach. I'm convinced that one of the biggest problems Republicans have had is how we communicate messages. Sometimes they're too complicated. Sometimes they're too cerebral. They don't get at the heart. When I watch videos that you post, they're very simple messages about how we can be good people, better citizens, better parents, make common sense decisions. And they're done on social media in a very short way. I started thinking about that in the context of this coming election. The entire House of Delegates is up. Do you think that Republicans do a good enough job of getting across the nut of the key messages that they need to?
No, we suck at it.
Yeah, I agree. No, but that's why I think it's so compelling, because you're sitting there in a way that's what I find so, like I said, that so compelling about the videos is that they're not trying to whack you in the face. And I feel like we need to do more of what you're doing and less of what's coming out of, like, say, Washington, D.C.
No, I appreciate that. I think a lot of what Republicans tend to talk about tends up being a little bit esoteric at times. So we want to get, and some of it too is we come off as angry. And I was once explaining this to somebody where it was a friend of mine, a little bit left to center, and she goes, why are you guys you just seem so angry? I said, and I knew this, but I said, you like art, right? She goes, yeah. I said, so Monet, Van Gogh, Impressionist. She goes, oh yeah, no, I love it. I said, okay, imagine going to the Monet Museum and seeing somebody come in there and just start finger painting all over, a water lilies painted by Monet. I said, you'd be furious, right? She said, yeah. I said, not because you're an angry person, but because you would be frustrated at the destruction of something that you feel is beautiful. She said, yeah. I said, that's how we feel about the Constitution.
Right.
That's how we feel about our system of government, our history, or things like that, where we understand that it's not perfect, but we see something truly beautiful, and we see something truly noble about it. And when it gets torn down, or when we feel like it's being subverted, there's a righteous indignation about the destruction of something that we think is beautiful.
I see, once again, you nailed it. I mean, but that's it, because I feel, someone asked me once about my time at the White House, and I said every once in a while I looked up at, the videos, because obviously in real time you don't do it. But after the fact, there were times when I was like, I said I felt like an angry leprechaun. I was just yelling at people, and but it's same thing where I looked at the thing and I go, that's just not, if I wouldn't like me sometimes. And that's the problem, is that we need to think about how we're messaging things, because more people are with us on the policies. I'm convinced of that, whether it's the border, life, all these issues. I think we have the right message and the right policy, but we come across as like angry and mean, as opposed to inviting, because I just think people would want to be with us more, but we're not making the sale.
No, I think one of the things that I will talk to people, and look, I'm guilty of this too sometimes when I get angry and I'm just, but it's like, look, it's one thing to defend a principle, but why are you defending the principle? Well, you're defending a principle because of how you believe it affects people.
Right.
So defend the person, defend the people, because that's one of the issues, is that we constantly find ourselves in a situation where we're defending liberty, or we're defending free market economics, or we're defending property rights. And that's all fine. But then on the left, they always come off like they're defending a vulnerable third party that needs their assistance.
Right.
And so whenever they frame their arguments that way, what it looks like is they're defending that vulnerable third party from us. And one of the things I really emphasize is that's not true at all. In fact, we think their policies hurt the very people that they claim to be helping. And this is true across the board. And you can even, on some level, if you want to be generous, you can appreciate that, okay, I understand that they want to help somebody, but I don't think what they're doing helps. And so you point that out, right? I'm not going to sit there and you can argue for, let's take a very controversial policy right now, and that's trans youth. Well, you can sit there and argue that this is a biological argument, that what is taking place is incorrect and it's delusional and it's all these other things. You can do that. But then what does the other person do? The other person immediately steps in and goes, how dare you attack this child?
Right.
No. What I think is wrong, like, I can't imagine a scenario where a child is confused, predominantly because their hormones are going crazy as they're going through puberty and everything else they're about to start it. And all of a sudden the world stops making sense to them because of these changes.